The courtroom was silent. Only the sound of papers moving and chairs creaking could be heard. The judge sat high above everyone, his face serious and tired. Lawyers whispered to their clients. The air was heavy, filled with tension, like something important was about to happen. On one side, a woman sat quietly. Her name was Sarah. She was dressed in a plain blue dress, her hair tied back, her eyes looking straight ahead. She looked calm, but her hands were shaking under the table. Nobody noticed. At the back of the courtroom, a small boy stood up. He was thin, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with big brown eyes that looked both scared and brave at the same time. His clothes were simple, slightly old, as if he did not have much. He took a step forward. People turned their heads to see him. A guard moved closer, ready to stop him, but the boy raised his voice before anyone could act. His words cut through the air like a knife. "You're my mom." The boy's small finger pointed directly at Sarah. The whole room froze. Gasps echoed in the courtroom. The lawyers stopped speaking. The judge leaned forward, his eyebrows raised. The guard froze in his step. Everyone's eyes moved between the boy and the woman. Sarah's face went pale. She looked at the boy, then quickly looked away. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. The boy took another step, his voice louder this time. "You're my mom. I know you are." The silence grew deeper. It felt like the whole world had stopped breathing. One lawyer stood up, his face red with shock. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. That child is not connected to this case. Someone remove him immediately." But the judge raised his hand, stopping the guard. His voice was calm but heavy. "Wait. Let him speak." The boy's heart was beating fast. He looked small and lost in that big courtroom, but his eyes were steady. He looked at Sarah again. "You are my mom. I remember your face. I remember your voice." Sarah finally spoke. Her voice was cold, but her hands betrayed her, still shaking under the table. "This child is mistaken. I have never seen him before in my life." Whispers filled the courtroom. People leaned closer to each other, murmuring. Some believed the boy, some believed the woman. But everyone wanted to know the truth. The judge tapped his gavel once. "Quiet. The child will explain." The boy took a deep breath. His eyes watered, but he did not cry. He spoke slowly, as if each word cost him great effort. "I grew up in many homes. Nobody wanted me. I never knew my real family. But I had a picture. It was very old and torn. My foster mother gave it to me when I was little. She said it was found with me when I was a baby. In the picture, you were there." He looked at Sarah again. His small hand shook, but he kept pointing. "You were holding me. I know it was you. That's why I came here. That's why I said it. Because you are my mom." Tears welled up in some people's eyes. Even the guard looked down, uncomfortable. The boy's voice carried pain, but also a strange kind of hope. Sarah's lips pressed tight. She shook her head. "No. You are wrong. I have no child." But her eyes refused to meet the boy's. The judge leaned back in his chair, studying both of them. "This is a serious claim. The court cannot ignore it. If the child has proof, we will see it." The boy quickly reached into his pocket. His small hands pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was not just paper, it was a photograph. Old, faded, edges broken. He walked carefully to the front and gave it to the judge. The judge held it up. The photo showed a young woman, smiling, holding a baby in her arms. The resemblance was clear. The young woman looked exactly like Sarah. Gasps filled the room again. The judge looked at Sarah. "Do you deny this is you in the picture?" Sarah's face turned white. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her fingers dug into the wooden table in front of her. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. "Yes, that is me. But that baby is not this boy. My child died a long time ago." The boy shook his head fiercely, tears falling now. "No. I didn't die. I am here. I am alive. And you are my mom." The courtroom was filled with emotion. People whispered, others wiped their eyes. The story was becoming bigger than the case itself. The judge's voice cut through the noise. "This matter cannot be brushed aside. We will hear the full truth. Until then, this court will remain in session." Sarah's eyes finally met the boy's. For a moment, time stopped. Her lips trembled. Her eyes filled with something: fear, sadness, or maybe recognition. But she quickly turned away, refusing to show more. The boy, still standing, wiped his tears. His voice was shaky but strong. "You know the truth. And one day, everyone else will know too." The courtroom fell into silence once again. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The weight of the moment pressed on everyone. And just like that, the first crack in the wall of secrets had appeared. The story was only beginning. The courtroom was still heavy with silence. The boy's words had changed everything. People no longer looked at Sarah as just another witness. Now, they looked at her as a mother who might be hiding the truth. The judge ordered a short break. Lawyers stood up, people whispered in groups, and guards moved about. But the boy sat quietly on a wooden bench. His small hands clutched the old photograph tightly, as if it was the only thing keeping him strong. For him, this was not just a courtroom. This was the place where he might finally find answers. His name was Daniel. Daniel's memories. Daniel's life had never been easy. He had no memory of parents, no memory of a real home. His earliest memories were of small rooms filled with other children, crying and fighting. He remembered new faces every year, families who took him for a while, then gave him back. Some families were kind. Some were cruel. In some homes, he was fed and clothed but never loved. In others, he was treated like a burden, shouted at for the smallest mistake. But through all of it, Daniel carried one thing with him: the photograph. It was old, torn, and faded, but he kept it safe. The woman in the photo had soft eyes and a gentle smile. She was holding a baby, him. When nights were dark and lonely, Daniel would look at that picture. He would whisper to himself, "One day, I will find her. One day, I will know who I really am." That picture gave him hope when everything else was lost. The search. When Daniel turned 7, he started asking questions. He asked social workers, teachers, and anyone who might know, "Who is this woman? Where is she?" Most people told him it was impossible. Some even said, "Maybe she doesn't want to be found." But Daniel refused to believe that. A mother could not forget her child. A mother could not turn away forever. He noticed small things in the photograph. A building in the background. A hospital sign, half visible. A necklace around the woman's neck. Piece by piece, he began to search. He showed the photograph to strangers. Some shook their heads. Some shrugged. But one day, an old nurse at a clinic looked closely at the picture. Her eyes narrowed. She whispered, "I know her. I think I know her." That was the first time Daniel heard Sarah's name. The journey. Daniel saved coins he found. He carried small bags, helped shopkeepers, anything to earn a little money. His foster families never cared where he went as long as he came back before dark. Finally, one day, Daniel heard that Sarah was appearing in court for a case. He did not understand the case, but he knew it was his chance. He walked to the courthouse, his photograph in his pocket, his heart beating fast. And when he saw her sitting there, he knew. He felt it deep inside. It was not just the face, it was something stronger. It was a bond. That was why he stood up. That was why he spoke. Back in the courtroom, The judge called everyone back after the break. The courtroom filled again, whispers still flying. The story of the boy's claim was already spreading through the halls. Daniel sat near the front now, his legs swinging nervously. Sarah sat opposite, her face pale, her hands folded tightly. The judge looked serious. This is no ordinary claim. We will hear the child's past. We will listen to his story. Only then will we decide if further investigation is needed. A lawyer leaned forward. But, Your Honor, this child's words are not enough. He could be mistaken. The judge's voice was firm. Maybe. Or maybe not. Let us hear him. Daniel speaks. Daniel stood up again. His voice was small, but the silence in the courtroom made every word clear. I never had a family. I grew up moving from one home to another. I never knew why. Nobody told me the truth. But I had this picture. It was the only thing I had from the beginning. He lifted the photograph, his little hands shaking. I used to look at it every night. I used to dream that one day, she would come for me. That she would tell me I was not alone. I looked for her everywhere. I never gave up. And when I saw her here, I knew. I just knew. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of years of loneliness. The courtroom was silent. Some people wiped their eyes. Even the judge's face softened for a moment. Sarah's struggle. All eyes turned to Sarah. She sat stiff, her lips pressed tight. Finally, she spoke, her voice shaking. This boy is wrong. My child died years ago. This cannot be him. But as she said it, her hands trembled. Her eyes refused to meet Daniel's. The judge studied her carefully. Mrs. Sarah, the child believes you are his mother. The photograph shows you holding a baby. If you truly have nothing to hide, then you will not fear investigation. Sarah looked trapped. Her face was pale, her body tense. For a moment, it seemed like she might say something. But instead, she whispered. I have nothing more to say. The courtroom reaction. Whispers exploded again. Some people believed Sarah. Others believed Daniel. But everyone could feel it, the truth was not simple. Something was hidden. Something from the past. The judge struck his gavel. This matter will not be ignored. Records will be checked. Testimonies will be heard. This court will uncover the truth. Daniel's heart pounded. For the first time in his life, someone powerful was listening to him. For the first time, the truth seemed possible. He looked at Sarah one last time. Her eyes flickered, full of emotion she tried to hide: fear, pain, maybe even love. And deep inside, Daniel knew. This was only the beginning. The past was not forgotten. It was waiting to be revealed. The courtroom was tense once again. Everyone had listened to the boy's story. His words were still fresh in their minds, echoing in the silence that followed. The judge leaned back, his face unreadable, but his eyes were fixed on Sarah. She sat frozen, her lips pressed tightly together, her hands trembling even though she tried to hide it under the desk. The boy, Daniel, was still standing, clutching the photograph like it was his life. His eyes stayed on Sarah, filled with something between hope and pain. For him, this moment meant everything. For Sarah, it was a storm she did not want to face. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice louder than before, though it shook at the edges. This child is mistaken. I am not his mother. I have never seen him before in my life. Her denial echoed across the courtroom like a heavy blow. Some gasped. Others frowned. Daniel's lips trembled, but he did not back down. You're lying, he said softly. The words were not shouted, yet they carried a sharpness that pierced through the silence. His small voice seemed to hold more strength than any lawyer's argument. Sarah's lawyer stood quickly. Your Honor, this child is confused. He has been in and out of foster care.
Of course, he wants to believe he belongs to someone. But that does not make it true. This entire distraction should be ignored.
The judge raised a hand. His voice was calm but firm.
Enough.
The child may be confused, yes, but his claim is not something we can dismiss without care.
We will hear more. Sarah's eyes darted around the room.
She could feel the weight of every stare pressing on her. Her hands clenched the table harder. She tried to look calm, but her chest rose and fell too fast. The photograph was proof, but still she denied.
It is only a picture, she said. Yes, it is me in that photo.
But the child in it, he is not this boy. My child died years ago.
That is the truth. Daniel shook his head fiercely.
Tears filled his eyes.
I didn't die. I'm right here. Why won't you believe me?
His voice cracked, but his eyes held steady on Sarah, begging her to see what he already knew.
The people in the courtroom could not hide their emotions. Some whispered that Sarah was heartless. Others said maybe the boy was mistaken, clinging to a hope that wasn't real. But almost everyone felt there was something in Sarah's face, something she was trying to bury.
The judge leaned forward, studying her closely. If your child died, as you claim, then there will be records.
Hospital files.
Birth and death certificates.
We will examine them. Sarah's lips parted, but no words came.
Her throat tightened as she forced out, "Do whatever you must.
The truth will be clear."
But even as she spoke, her hands trembled more violently. She quickly hid them in her lap, but Daniel saw.
He noticed everything.
He took a deep breath and whispered, almost to himself, "You're scared, because you know." The words seemed to strike her. She looked at him sharply, then turned away, her eyes fixed on the wooden table as though if she did not look at him, she could erase his existence. The lawyer pressed his point again, his voice strong and demanding.
Your Honor, this child is creating a scene. He has no documents, no DNA tests, nothing but an old picture.
The woman before you has no living child.
We request that his claims be dismissed.
But the judge shook his head.
Not dismissed. Investigated. This court cannot ignore such a serious matter. His gavel struck once, silencing all protests.
Daniel's heart pounded with hope, but also with fear. He wanted so badly for Sarah to admit the truth, to open her arms and say she was his mother.
But instead, she looked away, her denial cutting into him like a knife.
Her voice was steady now, colder, almost harsh.
Listen to me, child. I do not know you. You are not my son. Stop this foolishness before you ruin your life and mine.
The words were sharp, but behind them her voice cracked slightly, like glass under pressure.
Daniel heard it. He felt it.
A part of her was breaking, but she refused to let anyone see.
Tears spilled down Daniel's cheeks. He did not shout back. He did not fight with anger. He only whispered, his voice carrying across the courtroom in painful honesty, "If you are not my mother, then why are you crying?" The question cut deeper than anything else.
For the first time, Sarah's face twisted. She pressed her lips together, but tears welled in her eyes. Quickly, she wiped them away with the back of her hand and turned her head aside.
Gasps came from the audience again. The judge's eyes narrowed.
The lawyers fell silent. That one question had done what no argument could have shown: the weakness in her denial.
Sarah stood up suddenly.
Her chair scraped loudly against the floor.
I have nothing more to say here. I will not be questioned like this by a child.
Her voice was filled with anger, but it was a fragile anger, built to hide something else. The judge spoke firmly.
Sit down, Mrs. Sarah. Until this matter is settled, you will remain part of this court. Your connection to this boy will be investigated fully. Slowly, unwillingly, Sarah sat down again.
Her face was stone, but her hands were restless, twisting in her lap.
Daniel sank back into his seat.
His small shoulders shook, but not from fear. For the first time in his life, someone was pushing against her walls of denial.
The truth was out there, hidden but alive, and he knew it would come. The courtroom was no longer just a place of law. It had become a battlefield of hearts, a place where denial and hope clashed in every glance, every word. And as silence settled once more, one thing was clear to everyone present: Sarah was hiding something, and the boy was not going to stop until the truth was uncovered. The denial was strong, but the truth was stronger. The next hearing came quickly. The judge had ordered records to be checked, and now the courtroom was filled with an even heavier silence than before. Everyone wanted to know if the boy's words carried truth or if Sarah's denial would stand. Daniel sat on the front bench, his small hands clutching the photograph as if it gave him strength. His eyes stayed fixed on Sarah. She avoided his gaze, staring instead at the floor, her face pale but carefully blank. The judge entered, papers in his hand. The sound of the gavel echoed sharply. This court has received reports from the hospital and official records regarding the birth Mrs. Sarah claimed long ago. The words cut through the air, and every person leaned forward to listen. The judge continued, his voice slow, each word heavy with meaning. According to hospital documents, Mrs. Sarah gave birth to a son 8 years ago. The records show the child was declared stillborn. However, he paused, letting the silence drag, the suspense grow. There are inconsistencies in the files. Signatures missing. Pages altered. The medical staff involved left unexplained notes. It does not align with the claim of a natural death. A wave of shock rippled through the room. Lawyers exchanged looks. The audience gasped. Sarah's body stiffened, her hands gripped the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. Daniel's heart leaped. He could barely breathe. He whispered to himself, "I knew it. I knew it." The judge lifted another paper. Further investigation reveals that the child recorded as stillborn was in fact transferred out of the hospital under unusual circumstances. There is no official record of burial. Instead, the file ends abruptly, as if someone wanted the trail to disappear. All eyes turned to Sarah. She looked frozen, her eyes darting back and forth, searching for escape. Daniel stood, his voice trembling but full of courage. "That's me. I am that child. You see? I didn't die. They took me away from you." His voice cracked, and tears slipped down his cheeks, but he kept going. "You are my mom. You know it now." The judge's face was stern. He looked at Sarah directly. "Mrs. Sarah, this court demands an explanation. Did you know your child was alive? Were you part of this deception?" Sarah's lips opened but no sound came. She shook her head slowly, her face twisted in pain. At last, words broke free in a whisper. I was told he died. They told me I would never see him again." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The lawyers shouted to be heard. The judge struck his gavel hard. "Order!" Daniel's chest tightened. He stared at her with wide eyes. "Then you knew about me? You felt it? You looked at me and you knew?" Her eyes finally met his. For the first time, her denial cracked. Tears gathered and slid down her face. When I saw your eyes, I felt something I had buried for years. I tried to push it away, but I couldn't." Her voice trembled, her mask falling piece by piece. "You look exactly like him. You are him." Gasps filled the room. Sarah's lawyer buried his face in his hands. The judge leaned forward. "So you admit this boy could be your son?" Sarah covered her mouth with her hand. She could not speak, but the tears running down her cheeks were answer enough. Daniel's own tears spilled faster. For the first time in his life, his heart felt both joy and pain at once. Joy because she had finally admitted it, pain because it had taken so long, because she had denied him so many times before. He wanted to run to her, but his small feet stayed frozen, waiting for her to come to him. But before anything could move further, one of the lawyers spoke up, his voice sharp and suspicious. "Your Honor, this is not only about the woman and the child. Someone tampered with those records. Someone lied, someone took that child away. This is bigger than what we see. The judge nodded gravely. Yes. The truth is larger than one denial. This court will continue its search. The question now is, who separated this mother and son, and why?
Daniel turned his head slightly, scanning the courtroom. For a brief second, he thought he saw a shadowed figure in the back row, someone watching with cold, still eyes. When Daniel blinked, the figure shifted away, disappearing into the crowd. A chill ran down his spine. Sarah saw him looking and whispered softly, so only he could hear, "They didn't want me to have you. They made me believe you were gone. I don't know who, but I will find out." Her words, fragile and broken, carried a promise that made Daniel's heart burn with hope. The gavel struck again. The judge's voice filled the room. This matter is not finished. The truth is buried, but it will be uncovered. Court is adjourned until further investigation. The people began to leave, buzzing with whispers. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others wiped their tears. Daniel remained still, staring at Sarah. She looked at him finally, really looked at him. Their eyes locked in a silence filled with questions, fear, and something deeper, a bond that denial could not erase. He wanted her to run to him, to hold him, to say she was sorry. She wanted to, her whole body trembling with it, but something held her back. Guilt, fear, or the heavy chains of the past. Daniel whispered under his breath, a promise to himself. One day, you will hold me again. One day, nothing will keep us apart. And as the courtroom emptied, the truth hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. The child had found his mother, but the story of why they were torn apart was only beginning. The courtroom was quieter than ever before. The truth had begun to show itself, and no one could look away. Papers had been found, lies had been exposed, and Sarah's silence had cracked into tears. Yet still, questions hung in the air like heavy chains. Who had taken the child? Why had the truth been buried? Daniel sat on the wooden bench, his small legs swinging, his fingers wrapped around the photograph that had carried him this far. He kept looking at Sarah. She had finally admitted that something inside her recognized him, yet she still sat far away, her arms crossed, her body shaking with fear. He wanted her to walk across the courtroom, to hold him, to tell him he was safe at last. But she did not move. The judge returned after a short recess. His face was stern, his voice steady. We are not finished. This is not only about paperwork. This is about a mother and her child. Mrs. Sarah, I will ask you again, clearly and directly, do you accept that this boy is your son? The question cut into her like a blade. Sarah's lips trembled. Her lawyer whispered for her to deny again, to keep strong, but she could no longer pretend. Her voice broke as she spoke. I don't know how. I don't understand, but yes. I feel it. He is mine. The words fell like thunder in the silent room. Daniel's heart leaped. He stood, tears running freely down his cheeks. You admit it? You really admit it? His voice was full of hope, fear, and longing all at once. Sarah covered her face with her hands. She tried to hold back her sobs, but they came anyway, loud and uncontrollable. Her shoulders shook as years of pain she had buried came rushing back. They told me you were dead, she cried. They placed you in my arms for only a moment, and then they took you away. I screamed, I begged, but they said you were gone. I lived all these years with that grief, with that lie. And now you are standing here. The courtroom was frozen. People wiped their eyes. Even the lawyers lowered their heads. The guard at the door looked away, uncomfortable at the rawness of her pain. Daniel moved closer, his voice trembling. I'm alive, Mom. I was never gone. All those nights I thought of you, all those years I wanted to find you. I never stopped believing. Her hands dropped slowly from her face, and for the first time she looked at him without fear, without denial, only with the broken love of a mother who had lost everything and suddenly found it again. Daniel, she whispered, his name shaking on her lips as though it was the first time she had dared to say it. The judge allowed the moment, his gavel silent. This was no longer just a trial, it was something deeper, something human. Sarah stood, her knees weak, and finally she walked toward him. Her eyes streamed with tears, her body trembling, but step by step she closed the distance. Daniel stood frozen, afraid that if he moved, the moment might vanish like a dream. When she finally reached him, she fell to her knees in front of him. She cupped his small face in her hands, staring at him like she was trying to memorize every detail. "I thought I lost you forever. I thought my life ended that day. And now you're here, right in front of me." Daniel threw his arms around her neck and held her tightly. The sobs that came from him were heavy, shaking his little body. He buried his face in her shoulder, clinging to her as though he feared she might disappear again. The room was filled with the sound of their crying. It was not a soft reunion, it was painful, raw, and full of years of broken pieces finally trying to fit together again. People in the audience cried openly. Some whispered prayers. The judge's voice, though steady, softened. This court recognizes the emotional weight of this moment. But questions remain. Someone caused this separation. Someone lied, forged records, and tore apart a mother and her child. That truth must be found. Sarah nodded through her tears, still holding Daniel close. "I want to know who did this to us. I want justice for my son." Daniel's small hand clutched her dress tightly. He did not want to let go. He had lived his whole life without her touch, and now that he had it, he feared it could be stolen again. Sarah kissed his forehead, whispering promises into his ear. "I will never lose you again. No one will take you from me now. You are mine, always." But as strong as her words were, there was still a shadow over them. The truth of who had stolen him remained hidden. Somewhere, someone had watched this reunion with cold eyes, knowing the real secret. At the back of the courtroom, a man slipped quietly out of the door. No one noticed except Daniel. For just a second, his eyes caught the stranger's face. It was unfamiliar, but the look in those eyes was chilling, filled with secrets he did not yet understand. Daniel shivered, pressing himself closer into his mother's arms. She held him tighter, sensing his fear, though she did not know its cause. The judge struck the gavel once more. This case is far from over. The reunion is powerful, but justice demands more. We will find who is responsible. Sarah stood slowly, her hand holding Daniel's. Her tears had not stopped, but now there was fire in her eyes, a mother's rage and determination. For years she had lived in silence, carrying grief alone. Now, with her son beside her, she would fight to uncover every lie, every betrayal. Daniel leaned against her side, his heart full yet heavy. He had found her, but the journey was not finished. Something darker waited ahead, and he could feel it pressing on them both. As they walked out of the courtroom together for the first time, whispers followed them. Some voices were filled with sympathy, others with curiosity, but Daniel heard none of it. All he heard was the steady beat of his mother's heart as she held him close, promising without words that she would never let him go again. And yet, deep inside, he knew their story was only half told. The hardest truths were still hidden, waiting to break open. The air outside the courtroom was different. The heavy silence was gone, replaced by whispers, murmurs, and flashes from cameras. People crowded the hallway, eager to catch a glimpse of the boy and the woman who had shocked an entire court with their reunion. Daniel held tightly to Sarah's hand, almost afraid that if he let go, she would vanish again. His fingers were small, but his grip was fierce. Sarah looked down at him often, her eyes swollen from crying, her lips pressed with both fear and determination. They walked slowly, each step together feeling unreal. For years she had mourned a child she believed was gone, and now he walked beside her. For years he had searched for the face in his old photograph, and now that face was right here, alive, and holding his hand. When they reached the steps outside, reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed in their faces. Sarah shielded Daniel, pulling him close to her side. She did not answer anyone. Her only focus was on him, her son. Daniel looked up at her. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of years of longing. "Are you really staying with me now?" Sarah knelt down, cupping his face in both hands.
Yes, she whispered, her voice breaking. I lost you once. I will not lose you again. I promise, Daniel. No matter what comes, I will fight for you. Tears filled his eyes, but this time they were mixed with relief. He threw his arms around her neck and held on tightly, and she embraced him as if she could never let go. People around them watched, moved by the rawness of the moment, but for Daniel and Sarah the world faded. For a few seconds, there was nothing but a mother and her child finding each other again. But peace did not last long. In the crowd, unseen by most, stood the same man Daniel had noticed earlier. His face was calm, too calm, his eyes sharp like steel. He watched the reunion with no emotion, only calculation. And then, with the quietest of smiles, he turned and disappeared into the sea of people. Daniel noticed him again, just for a second, and his small body shivered. He clung tighter to Sarah's hand. She felt his fear and held him close, whispering, "You are safe now. Nothing will take you from me again." Yet even as she said it, the shadow of doubt lingered inside her. Someone had stolen her child once. Someone had faked his death, hidden the truth, and forged records. That kind of power did not vanish easily. The judge's words echoed in her mind, "This is not finished. Someone must be held responsible." That night, Sarah and Daniel were given a small private room to stay in, protected until the investigation continued. Daniel sat on the bed, clutching the old photograph that had guided him through the darkest years. Sarah sat beside him, brushing his hair gently with her fingers, memorizing every detail of his face, every expression, as if trying to make up for the years lost. He looked at her carefully. "Mom, do you really believe me now?" She pulled him into her arms, holding him close. "Yes, Daniel. I believe you with all my heart. I should have believed the moment I saw you. Forgive me for denying you." He shook his head against her shoulder. "I just wanted you to see me. I just wanted you to know I'm here." Her tears fell silently onto his hair. "I see you now. And I will never let you go." For a moment, silence wrapped around them, warm and soft. But the questions still haunted them both. Who had taken Daniel away? Why had they lied? And why did that man in the crowd watch them with such cold eyes? The next morning, the case was back in the judge's hands. Evidence was being pulled, names were being checked, and people who had worked in the hospital 8 years ago were being called to testify. The truth was closing in, step by step. Daniel stood beside his mother as they entered the court again. He no longer looked like the lost boy who had stood up alone and declared his truth. Now he stood with his mother's hand in his back straighter, his eyes brighter, though fear still lived behind them. Sarah's strength was his strength now. When the judge spoke, the entire room leaned in. The reunion of mother and son is undeniable. But this case does not end here. Records prove that foul play occurred. A child was taken. Lies were told. This court will not rest until the one responsible is brought to justice. Sarah's heart pounded. Daniel squeezed her hand tighter. They knew their fight was not over. But they also knew they were not alone anymore. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt the warmth of belonging. For the first time in years, Sarah felt her broken heart start to heal. Yet both of them could sense it, the storm was not gone. It was waiting, somewhere just out of sight, in the hands of the one who had watched them and vanished into the crowd. As they walked out together, people whispered about the shocking case, about the boy who had stood in court and said the words that changed everything, "You're my mom." They whispered about the lies uncovered and the love that had survived. But Daniel and Sarah did not hear the whispers. They heard only each other's voices, promises made and promises believed. And though danger still lurked, though shadows still followed, they walked forward together, hand in hand, ready for whatever truth was still waiting. The story of their pain had been told. The story of their reunion had begun. And the story of the hidden enemy was yet to come. For now, the boy had found his mother, and the mother had found her son. In a world filled with lies, that truth was enough to keep them standing.